Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, November the 19th, 2025, and this is our series, Questions About God and the Bible. And as I arrived here at the church today, I told our camera operator, because I write on a little whiteboard the different topics that we're going to podcast about, and I told her I don't have a question about God and the Bible for this week, because sometimes we don't get questions sent to us either by people who are watching through the podcast or by people who are here in our church community. And she said, well, I've got one, because her own son, who is 13 years old, has been reading in his Bible, and he was focusing in where it describes the mark of the beast, that some translations say that you receive the mark in your right hand or your forehead, or on your right hand or your forehead. And he wanted to know, which one is it? That may seem like a hair-splitting type of question, but it's actually a very good question, because we're reading in English translations. People who have spent years going to school studying Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, the three languages that the Bible is written in, and the New Testament is in Greek. And a lot of times, the translators are having to pick out what words will best convey the thought that the original manuscript says. Because you see, unless you can read Greek, you can't read the New Testament in the original language. You have to have a translation. Some translations are what we call word-for-word translations, where they're trying to choose the most precise English equivalent to what it says in the case of the New Testament in Greek, or Hebrew in the case of the Old Testament. And other translations are a thought for thought, where they're trying to express it in a way that grammatically makes sense to us and expresses the right thought, but it's not necessarily a precise translation. Well, when it comes to whether something is in or on, in English, we think of something being in, like I can take my glass of tea here and take a sip. I've got now the tea inside of me. If I were to take the lid off the cup and try to drink the tea, it's possible that a drop or two might spill out onto my chin, or possibly onto my hand or my shirt or the table. And then in that case, the tea would be on me, but not in me. When it comes to talking about the mark of the beast, on or in is really pretty much the same thing, because you see the point is, and this is a first century man, John the beloved apostle, who's being shown things from heaven that are going to happen in the future. And he's trying his best to record what he saw, what he heard, for generations who are going to be reading his words, sometimes in the original language he wrote it in, which was Greek, sometimes in another language. And when it comes to the description of the mark of the beast, you're going to find that in Revelation 13. So this is an NIV, which is a thought-for-thought translation. It reads well for American audiences to be able to read it and understand it. It's not as formal as like the King James English. I'm going to read this passage out of Revelation 13 in the NIV, which is a thought translation, where it is describing the mark of the beast. Revelation 13, John is describing the beast out of the earth, starting in verse 11, and then he's going to describe what the beast is able to do, which includes forcing people at a specific point in human history during Daniel's 70th week, better known to you as the tribulation period, that at that point in time, the Antichrist will be in full control of the earth. A one-world government is coming, and it'll be led by a man of lawlessness. And that person is going to require that every human being on the face of the earth take a mark of loyalty, either on the right hand or the forehead, not on the leg, not on the stomach, not on the cheek, not on the left hand. Specifically the right hand over the forehead. And when they do it, they will know that they are pledging their eternal souls to worship that false Messiah. And they'll be condemned for all eternity. It's an irreversible decision. So the first thing I would say to the 13-year-old boy who asked the question, because I happen to know he's a Christian, I was here the day he made his profession of faith, saw him be baptized, is that whether it says in or on, don't lose sleep over it, because you're already going to be in heaven by the time people are required to take this. But the thought behind it is they know that they're pledging loyalty, and they're letting themselves be permanently marked, be identified with the one that they are worshiping, and they're choosing the wrong one. Revelation chapter 13, I'm going to start the reading in verse 11. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark, and because this is an NIV, it says, on his right hand or his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. John is describing here the rise of the Antichrist. That would be that first beast. And the second beast is the false prophet, who will be the head of this one world religion, where people are going to have to pledge loyalty to the Antichrist. And whether it's something that's visible on the skin or directly put subcutaneously underneath it, the thought behind it is the same. When I was a kid in the 1960s, and sometimes religious organizations would try to do movies about the rapture and the tribulation period, the best that they could come up with for the mark of the beast was something like barcodes. Something that was like ink on the hand, very, very visible, or ink on the forehead. Because that was the technology of the 1960s. Oh, but here we are. Now it's 2025, and microchips have been around for quite a while, where a microchip can be inserted in your skin, and it's not visible, but yet with the right device, someone can detect, oh, you have a microchip in you. We've already seen it in many places. You can look this up very easily on YouTube or other computer type channels, where some companies, instead of issuing people badges that have barcodes on there to let them gain access to secured places on the company property to do their jobs, or whether if they want to use vending machines, they can get a microchip implanted that's not any bigger than a single grain of rice, and you don't even really notice that it's there, and they can just run it under a scanner, and they can get chips and sodas out of the vending machines, or they can use it instead of having to keep up with a badge or hang on to a key to gain access to certain rooms, or having to punch in a numeric code to gain access to a locked room. In or on doesn't really matter. It's there. John is a first century fisherman. He's writing about technology that was at least 2,000 years in the future, because we're 2,000 years removed from John's time, and we can better understand either the barcodes or the implanted microchip. My dog has a microchip. When we first got that dog, microchip was implanted, and it was scanned at the store so that they knew which dog we had taken. And now if anything happens where my dog happens to get out of the yard and somebody finds him, they can carry him to a shelter or to any veterinarian's office, and the first thing that will happen is he'll be scanned in the ear, and they'll discover, oh, there's a microchip. It's registered. This dog is registered to these people, and they can contact me, and I can be reunited with my pet. We're very familiar with this technology now. John, though, is 2,000 years before this stuff becomes available. So he's writing, and he's using his everyday, ordinary, fisherman-type language to describe this mark. And what he's telling people is, here's what you need to know about that mark, that it's going to come at this point in time when this evil man has risen to power and he's deceived the whole world, and he's got a sidekick, a person who's going to be the head of this one world religion that's going to make life impossible for people unless they cave in and agree to take this mark. They'll know what they're doing. It's not a case of, well, you'll have this embedded because you see now that this technology is available. There were some people who were saying, oh no, I'm not going to work for that company if they're going to require me to get this microchip so that I can have access to the office because it's the mark of the beast. No, it isn't, because they know at the time that this occurs that what they're doing and the reason they're taking this mark is to say, I'm pledging my eternal soul, I'm worshiping this person as though he was God. They will know consciously what they're doing. So the people who know that this man isn't God, that this man is exactly who the Bible predicted would be the false prophet, and they refuse, they're basically being cancel cultured. They won't be able to go to the store and buy even the essentials that they need. Right now, we have a lot of different ways we can pay for things. I went to a luncheon earlier today, and I had the option of paying with cash, or paying with a check, or using one of my cards, or whipping out the phone. I have Flipper, but people have the smartphones. If I had a smartphone, I could have whipped out the phone and scanned the little QR code, and I could have paid electronically for the price of my luncheon ticket at this civic organization. The day's going to come when, in order to control people and to close off their options, that they're not going to be able to buy, to sell, to do anything. They'll be hunted down and killed if they refuse to pledge their loyalty to this false god and this false religion. Ironically, right before we started doing this particular podcast, I had already decided on the topic for our heroes and heroines of the church. And because it's the month of November, this month we're trying to feature people who were involved in the colonial period, the Pilgrims and the people who were the very first European settlers in America. Why? Because they came to this new world for the freedom to worship God according to the dictates of their conscience. And in today's earlier podcast, we were talking about the Mayflower Pilgrims, who were part of a church. They had to flee from England, first for a time to the Netherlands, and then they decided they needed to come to the New World. But they couldn't all come at once. And so they had to make the decisions, who's going in the first wave and who's maybe going to try to come later. And as it turns out, that first group of pilgrims coming over didn't come over with the pastor of their church. He was going to be one of the ones who stayed behind for a period of time while some other people went ahead. But why were they fleeing in the first place? Because the country they were living in, the head of the government was trying to tell them, if you're going to live in this country, you will believe what I tell you to believe. You will sign off saying this is truth, whether you think it's truth or not. Or we're going to put you in prison or kick you out of the country or possibly even take your life. That's the kind of situation that's going to exist when the mark of the beast comes into effect, which will be during the second half of the tribulation period. So anybody that's a believer beforehand, you don't need to lose any sleep over whether or not it's going to be a mark that's going to be visible on top of your hand or on top of your forehead, or whether it's something like an implanted microchip just under the skin. Either way, it's there and it's part of the person. Because, like I said, if you're a believer in Christ, you're already off planet Earth. You're already at home with the Lord before this becomes a requirement. But if you're one of these people who puts off making a decision for Christ and you happen to be alive on planet Earth during this period of history, you will absolutely know when you're confronted with a choice. If I take this mark, my only choices are risk my life and say no, or where do I want to get it, here or here. But you'll know that anybody who does that isn't doing it just so that they can buy and sell. They're doing it because they're agreeing of their own free will to worship the wrong God. And the price will be their eternal soul. So if you happen to be around during that time frame, make the right choice. Refuse that mark. Yes, you'll come under persecution. You may even die a martyr's death. But you follow your conscience before God and you worship God and God alone. It's really a great question. Thanks for watching.